Have you ever been judged, not for what you did, but for who you are? Imagine standing on a private jet, dressed with dignity, success written all over your face, yet still being told you don't belong. What would you do? Fight back, walk away, or stay silent just to survive? This is the story of Ava Carter, a black CEO, and her mother Marian, who were thrown off a private jet simply because someone decided their skin color didn't match the first-class seats. 20 minutes later, the world turned upside down, not for them, but for those who dared to humiliate them. But here's the real question when life strips you of dignity in front of the world. Do you choose anger or grace? Would you let hatred define you, or would you rise again and again, until even those who wronged you must look up in awe? Close your eyes for a moment. If you were Ava, powerful, successful, but still seen as less than, what would you do when justice finally knocks on your door? This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about resilience, forgiveness, and how one act of courage can light a fire that changes thousands of lives. So, are you ready to feel every heartbeat of this journey? Hit like, share, and subscribe, and let's step together into a story that will remind you of the strength that still lives inside us all. A cold wind whipped across the runway, bringing with it tiny needle-like drops of rain. The airport lights glinted off the silver fuselage of the jet, where the words Aerolux Private Jet glowed faintly through the water. A tall, black woman in a gray suit stood silently in the middle of the parking lot. Her hair was tied back, her face strangely calm. It was Ava Carter, 39, CEO of NovaShield Technologies, the fastest-growing cybersecurity company in America. Beside her, Marian Carter, a 62-year-old mother, held a small handbag in trembling hands, her coat wet from the rain. Her silver hair fell over her forehead, her voice hoarse. "Ava, what's going on?" Ava didn't answer right away. She just turned slightly to look at the pilot standing in front of the plane door. His voice dry. "I'm sorry, but I have orders. You two to leave the plane." "Whose orders?" Ava asked, her voice so calm that it made people pay attention. "From headquarters. Ms. Carter. Security reasons. Passenger change." Ava looked him straight in the eyes. Deep black eyes. No anger, just something colder than rain clarity. "Change passengers," she repeated. "I paid the full amount. $42,000. By personal transfer. Please confirm the reservation." The man swallowed, avoiding her gaze. "I was just following orders. Ma'am, I'm truly sorry." Ava said nothing more. She looked silently at her mother, then turned to the pilot. "Fine. If this is how you treat your customers, I will leave the plane. But before I leave, I want to record this entire conversation. Please state your full name, position, and who gave the order." The air was thick. The rain pattered on the metal roof, each drop seeming to emphasize her words. Marian gently held her daughter's hand. "Ava, come on. Don't cause trouble. We can take another flight." Ava turned, her eyes softening. "It's okay. Mom, they just made a mistake they won't even realize." She walked slowly, each step determinedly down the runway. Her high heels sank into the water, making a loud clicking sound. The wind blew the hem of her suit jacket, but her posture remained straight and firm, as if even the storm could not shake her. A ground staff member approached, speaking softly as Carter. "I'm very sorry. I only received the cancellation notice 10 minutes ago. I don't understand why there were other passengers booking at the same time. Headquarters said they had to be given priority." "Who are they?" Ava asked. The employee was silent. "I see," Ava said softly. "Give my thanks to your boss. I'm sure I'll see him again soon." She opened the door of the SUV parked nearby. The rain splashed on her face. Marian hurried after her jacket soaked, her voice trembling. "Is it really necessary to be so serious? It could be a misunderstanding." Ava turned to her mother, her voice gentle but firm. "Mom, this is not a misunderstanding. This is a test, and I will never let anyone rewrite my position with humiliation." At that moment, lightning flashed across the horizon, ripping through the gray clouds. In the car, Ava flipped open her phone and looked at the clock. She whispered something so low only she could hear. "They have 20 minutes to regret it." The car rolled off the cold, wet runway. Behind it, a luxurious silver plane took off, leaving 2 women, a mother, and a child standing silently in the rain. No tears, just absolute silence. As the car merged into the highway, Marian asked softly, "What will I do now?" Ava looked out the window, her voice as soft as the wind. "Mom, sometimes silence is the loudest voice." And then, what after silence, comes action. Somewhere inside her, a door opened. Not the door of anger, but the door of strength. The strength that comes from knowing you're right and choosing not to scream to prove it. The rain was still falling, but inside the car, the air was gradually warming. Ava handed her mother a dry towel and whispered, "Dry your hair, Mom, or you'll catch a cold. I need a few minutes." She opened her laptop and began typing. The NovaShield logo appeared on the screen, along with the words "System Access Granted." "Begin trace sequence." A sentence escaped her lips, half whisper, half declaration. "If they think they can humiliate us just because of the color of their skin, they will have to learn the concept of power all over again." And, just as she said, 20 minutes later, everything changed. 3 days before it all began, Atlanta had been unusually clear. No rain, just a gentle sun streaming through the glass windows of the NovaShield building. Inside the conference room, the air was so thick you could hear pens tapping on the table. Ava Carter sat at the head of the table. In front of her was a screen displaying the latest quarterly results. Revenue was up. The number of security contracts had doubled, and a list of potential partners in Europe was waiting to be signed. She conducted the meeting in a calm voice, each sentence firm but not raised. "The Paris project is key. If we sign with Ardent Systems, we will officially enter the European market," Ava said. A deep male voice came from the other end of the table, soft but firm. "And to do that, how much money do you plan to spend on this trip to Paris?" Ava. The questioner was Brian Lowell, the company's CFO. He was a white man with graying hair and a look of confidence mixed with disdain. He smiled and leaned back in his chair. "I looked at the expenses, and there's a private jet. A flight is $42,000, if I'm not mistaken. Are you sure that's the best use of your funds?" The room was silent. Ava didn't answer right away. She looked at Brian, her eyes neither cold nor soft, just as if staring straight into a dim spot between them. "This is a business trip combined with a strategy meeting, and I use my personal account to pay, not company funds." The 42,000 figure was not in the quarterly budget, Ava said slowly. Brian chuckled, tapping his fingers on the table. After all, the image of a CEO flying private when the company is still in the expansion phase can raise questions from shareholders. "You know, People care about symbols, not just numbers. Ava closed her laptop and leaned forward. I understand, and I hope shareholders care more about results than symbols. Any other thoughts? Brian. Her voice was soft but clear. Brian was silent for a second, then shook his head. No, just a suggestion. The meeting ended. Everyone stood up, exchanging puzzled glances. When the door closed, Brian was still sitting there. He pulled out his phone, opened his contacts, and dialed a saved number. The man's voice on the other end of the line was low and husky. Ask away. Brian. She still refuses to sell her shares. She even uses her own money to bypass the board. I tell you the truth. Ethan. She thinks she is untouchable. She will learn to be humble. Ethan Hargrove replied slowly. Let me handle it. Brian sat silently, outside the window. The wind blew through the trees in front of the building, the leaves rustling in a warning whisper. In the afternoon, Ava stayed at the office. Her office was simple and bright, decorated with a pot of white orchids her mother had given her for her birthday last year. On the desk was a photo of the two of them in their small kitchen in Marietta. She smiled when she looked at it. There was a soft knock on the door. Her assistant, Jenna, entered. Miss Carter. I have an invitation from Hargrove Capital. They want to meet you at the Ivy House tomorrow afternoon. Ava looked up, frowning slightly. Hargrove Capital. The group that tried to buy us last year. Yes, they said they wanted to discuss investment cooperation again. Ava was silent for a moment, then nodded. Okay, make an appointment, but just me and him, no one else. Jenna hesitated. I hear Ethan Hargrove is unpredictable. I know, but I don't shy away. Sometimes, to find out who's really blocking your path, you have to sit across from them, Ava said. The next morning, the elegant Ivy House restaurant on Peachtree Avenue, glass walls, soft jazz, the scent of roasted coffee. Ava arrived right on time. Ethan Hargrove was already there, black suit, salt and pepper hair, familiar winning smile. Ava Carter. Nice to meet you at last, he said, his voice hoarse but warm. You're the one the investment world is talking about? I like women who know how to make a splash. Ava shook hands and sat down. I prefer to create value than buzz, she replied, her voice soft. Ethan smiled. Very good. That's why I want to cooperate. We're willing to invest $200 million in return. Hargrove Capital will keep 30% of the shares and the right to participate in strategic direction. Ava stirred her coffee gently, looking into the swirling brown water. What does option mean, Mr. Hargrove? It means we help you grow sustainably. Sometimes. The most talented people need someone to remind them that the world is not all about ability. Ava looked up, her eyes shining like the sunlight from the window. Thanks for the advice, but I believe that ability and morality can go hand in hand. And I've never needed anyone to remind me to shrink myself to be accepted. The air seemed to freeze. Ethan leaned slightly, his smile fading. Miss Carter, some doors are opened by connections, not achievements. Sometimes knowing where to stand is a skill, Ava replied softly, her voice low but firm. Maybe that's why I built my own door. They were silent. Only the sound of spoons clinking against glasses could be heard. Ethan took out his business card and put it on the table. I always admire people with courage, but courage should not come with illusions. Think about it. There are skies that are not for everyone." Ava smiled. "I don't need the whole sky. I just need no one to block the light above me." She stood up, said goodbye, and left the restaurant. Outside, the sunlight poured down on the sidewalk, shining brightly. Her shadow stretched long and determined. Ethan watched, his fingers tapping his coffee cup. "She will know her true place soon enough," he muttered. Across the street, Ava walked quickly, but her heart was heavy. She knew Ethan Hargrove's type. His power lay not in his money, but in his ability to make people feel like they didn't belong. 3 days later, that very man would make the world witness the opposite. That afternoon, after a tense meeting with Ethan Hargrove, Ava drove toward the outskirts of Marietta. She wanted to go back to her mother's house, the small, silver-blue cabin where she had grown up, smelling apple pie bacon and listening to jazz on an old radio. The late autumn sun in Atlanta was not harsh, but golden as honey. The oak trees lining the road had changed color, red leaves falling sparsely on the hood. Ava rolled down the window, letting the wind in. There was a long silence in her heart, the kind of silence that can only be found in people accustomed to facing challenges. As the car turned onto the small road leading to the old residential area, Ava saw her mother watering the flowers on the porch. Her mother, Marian Carter, was still small, but her hands were veined with age. When she saw her daughter, she smiled brightly, a gentle smile, but her eyes were still slightly worried. "You're home. Ava, why didn't you tell me so I could cook your favorite dish?" Ava walked over and hugged her mother from behind. The scent of soap, wet earth, and hay mingled with her warm breath. "I just want to go home. I don't need anything. I need to hear your voice," Ava whispered. Marian patted her son's hand gently. "Is there something wrong at the company again? Tell me. I'm listening." Ava sat down on the wooden steps, looking at the familiar yard. The small rose tree in the corner of the garden was still laden with fruit, just like every year. She recounted the story of the afternoon she met Hargrove, her voice even, but each sentence seemed to be restrained. When she finished, she smiled slightly, an unhappy smile. "He said there are skies that are not for everyone." Marian looked at her son for a moment and then smiled gently. "He is right, my son. But he forgot one thing. The sky does not choose anyone. It only opens up to those who dare to look up." Ava was silent. She looked up at her mother. There was no anger in her mother's eyes, only a soft light. Marian got up, went into the house, and returned with 2 cups of tea. The steam smelled of licorice and honey. "Do you remember this house?" she asked. "How could I not remember I grew up here?" Ava replied. Marian smiled slightly. "When I started my business, remember, that year you said, 'Mom, I want to create something that can protect others from being hurt.' You don't know. That night, I sat up all night looking at this house. The next morning, I went to the bank and mortgaged it." Ava looked up, eyes wide. "Mom, I didn't say it to make you feel guilty. I said it because I wanted you to know how much I trusted you. I put my whole life in your hands without fear of losing it, because I know you would never make me regret it." Ava was silent. She put down her teacup and took her mother's hand. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I'm just afraid that someday I'll disappoint you." Marian shook her head. "This child, how can I be disappointed? You make me proud every day. I'm just afraid you will forget the most important thing." "What is it, Mom? Be gentle. You can be strong, smart, and determined. But don't let strength make you lose your gentleness. I have seen many people climb high and then forget where they were." Ava smiled softly, her voice choked. "Mom, I haven't lost my gentleness. I've just learned not to let anyone walk all over me anymore." Marian put her hand on her son's cheek. "That's fine. Sometimes kindness needs to be protected by steel." Mother and daughter sat still. The sunlight shone on the table through the teacups, brightening the whole space. After a while, Ava asked, "Have you ever regretted putting your trust in me?" Marian smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "If I had to do it all over again, I would still mortgage this house, even my life, if necessary. Do you know why? Because I love you. Not only that, because I believe this world needs people like you. People who are not afraid to stand alone." Ava rested her head on her mother's shoulder. The warmth and familiar smell of sweat melted away all the pressure. In that moment, she was no longer a CEO, no longer a woman fighting the forces out there. She was just a daughter who needed her mother's embrace. Outside, the wind gently shook the trees. A sparrow landed on the railing, chirped a few times, then flew away. Marian spoke, her voice low and slow. "Ava, do you remember your father? He died when you were 8, but before he died, he said something that I will never forget. Don't teach your child to win. Teach him to get up. I think you did it." Ava looked up at her mother, her eyes glistening with tears. "Mother, I promise I will never bow my head, no matter how humiliated I am. But I also promise not to retaliate with anger. I will let justice take its course." Marian nodded. "My daughter, that's enough." Afternoon fell. The last rays of sunlight spread across the wooden wall, creating pale yellow streaks. Ava stood up, walked out into the yard, and looked at the rose tree shedding its leaves. She spoke softly, as if to herself. "Thank you. Mom, you didn't just give me a roof. You showed me what roots are." That night, after Marian had fallen asleep, Ava sat on the porch. She opened her laptop, the blue light illuminating her face. On the screen was the partnership agreement Ethan Hargrove had sent her. She read it line by line, her eyes lighting up with a cold but fierce look. In the small house, the sound of insects in the garden mingled with the rhythmic tapping of the keyboard. Next to the computer was an old photo of her and her mother on the day the company opened. The background was a cheap white cloth, but the two of them were smiling brightly. Ava looked at the photo for a long time, then said softly, "Mom mortgaged the house, and I will protect the future." She pressed send and hung up. Outside, the night wind blew, the scent of ripe persimmons wafting through the air. A new chapter in her life was about to begin, and she knew it wouldn't be easy, but at least she wasn't alone. The next morning, Atlanta was hazy. The sky was a thin layer of gray, and a light breeze blew through the tall buildings. In her 23rd floor luxury apartment, Ava Carter started her morning as she always did. A cup of black coffee, a few minutes of meditation, and 30 minutes of reading the latest tech news. Everything seemed normal, but deep inside, something lingered from yesterday's conversation with her mother. She always remembered her mother's words, "Sometimes a gentle heart needs to be protected by steel." Those words made her feel both warm and like there was a warning waiting somewhere. When her phone rang, Ava saw an unfamiliar number. The screen read "Unknown Caller." She considered not answering, but her instincts made her stop. A man's voice came from the other end, deep, polite, but all too familiar. "Good morning, Miss Carter. This is Ethan Hargrove. I hope I'm not disturbing you." Ava was silent for a moment before answering. "Mr. Hargrove, I don't think we have anything more to discuss. I thought so too, but actually I do. I have another suggestion," he said, his voice calm and confident, as if everything were within his reach. "I'm listening," Ava replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I have a partner in Paris who's looking for a security company for their corporation. I thought you would be interested. If you agree, I can arrange a meeting during your trip to Paris this week." Ava tilted her head slightly. "You know my whole schedule." Ethan chuckled. "It's a small world of business, Miss Carter. Information travels fast. I just want to help you. An opportunity to expand into the European market." What do you think? Ava was silent. His voice was smooth as velvet, but there was a cold metal undertone. She felt uneasy, as if there was a trap in the invitation. "I will consider it. If it is suitable, I will contact you," she said briefly. "Great. I always admire women who seize opportunities. See you in Paris," he finished, his voice trailing off like a message, and hung up. Ava stared at the phone for a few seconds. Something was wrong. She felt like she had just heard a promise, but it felt more like a warning than an opportunity. She returned to her desk, turned on her computer, and sent a text message to Jenna, her assistant. "Check all the data on Hargrove Capital for me. I want to know who they've been contacting in the company this week." The response came just a few minutes later. Nothing unusual, but yesterday, Brian Lowell had a 15-minute call from a number registered as Hargrove HQ. No message. Ava paused, her eyes darkening. A thread formed in her mind. Ethan Hargrove, Brian Lowell, and now the Paris opportunity. Everything began to fit together like unwanted puzzle pieces. That afternoon, she attended a meeting with the engineering team. They presented the progress of the new security system, NovaShield's flagship project. She listened attentively, but her mind was still drawn to the call this morning. After the meeting, she stood by the window overlooking the city. Gray clouds hung across the sky. The buildings twinkled with lights, but to her eyes, everything seemed a different color. Jenna walked over and placed a stack of documents on the table. "Miss Carter, here is the contract with the charter company for the trip to Paris. I have confirmed the payment. They said the plane will be ready at 7 a.m. Friday." Ava nodded. "Thanks. Jenna, is there anything special about them Aerolux private jet? New company, serving high-end clients?" "I checked. They have a valid license." Ava smiled slightly, but her eyes remained absent. "Good. Get everything ready." After Jenna left, she opened her laptop and looked back at Hargrove Capital's profile. The words on their website caught her eye. "We redefine markets with power and vision." Ava read the sentence over and over again, then smiled. "Power without ethics is just a painted threat," she said softly. She made a note in her notebook. Don't forget the look in his eyes when he said the word humble. Maybe it was a promise of revenge. That night, Ava went home to her mother for dinner. Marian prepared a stew of potatoes and green beans, the aroma filling the small kitchen. They ate and talked as the storm outside never happened. "Mom, do you ever trust your intuition?" Ava asked, putting down her spoon. "Intuition is the voice of the soul, my child. It knows before reason. Why do you ask? I feel like something is wrong." Like someone is trying to pull me into their game. Marian smiled. If they want to play, let me be the one to set the rules. But don't forget, the game is only meaningful when you don't lose yourself. Ava nodded silently. The firelight from the stove reflected in her eyes like two small dots of light. That night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Ava went out onto the porch and looked up at the starry sky. She remembered Hargrove's words, Brian's glances in the conference room, and the way they had looked at her, both contemptuous and wary. She knew that people like them didn't stop with a refusal. A phone rang, breaking the silence. Ava picked it up and saw the caller ID Brian Lowell. "What's the matter?" "Brian," she asked. His voice was a little hesitant. "I just want to confirm the Paris plan. I think maybe we should reconsider." "Why, I heard a rumor that Ardent Systems might change their schedule. I'm not sure they still want to see you this week." Ava was silent for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "Where did the rumor come from?" "I heard it from someone in the investment community, or maybe from Hargrove." Ava narrowed her eyes, her voice low. "Thanks for letting me know. I'll check." She hung up and sat there for a long time. In her head, it all began to make sense. Ethan Hargrove didn't want to cooperate. He wanted her off the track, and if he couldn't buy her, he would take her off the track. Ava turned on her computer, typed a few quick commands, and connected to the internal security system. The screen lit up with the words "Network Trace Active." If this were a game, I would be the best player, she whispered. An hour later, she emailed the flight confirmation, Aero Lux, 7 to Aero AM Friday, 2 passengers. She signed Ava Carter. She closed her laptop and looked out at the night sky. A shooting star streaked across the sky, leaving a thin trail of light. She clasped her hands and said softly, "Dad, if you're listening, keep an eye on me. There's a storm coming, but I'm ready." And, as if on cue, the wind picked up, swirling the dry leaves around on the porch. Ava had a vague feeling that the calm before the storm was always the quietest moment. 3 days later, that call would become the gateway to a series of events that would make her name known to the world. Friday morning. Weak sunlight streamed through the bedroom window. Atlanta was still sleepy after a night of light rain. Ava Carter woke earlier than usual. She always liked the time when the city was quiet, when the sound of cars had not yet filled the air, and everything was left with a breath of peace. She stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair and tying it into a low bun. On the table were 2 small suitcases, neatly packed from the night before. One was hers, one was her mother's. Marian Carter was still sleeping in the next room, sleeping peacefully as always. Ava looked at her mother through the half-open window. Her silver hair was loosely spread on the pillow. Her face was gentle. Her hands were lightly holding the blanket as if afraid of the wind. For a moment, Ava suddenly thought could everything this peaceful was just the silence before something was about to change. She steeled herself, poured herself a cup of coffee, and stepped out onto the balcony. The air was cool, down on the street. A few cars passed by, leaving a faint trail of light. She took a sip of the bitter coffee, looking out at the horizon where the sky was beginning to lighten. Light footsteps behind her. Marian was awake. "Why are you up so early?" Mother asked, her voice still hoarse. "I'm used to it." "Mom, did you sleep well?" "Okay. Maybe I was just too excited. I never thought I would get to fly out of the country for the first time in my life." Ava smiled and walked over to help her mother straighten her collar. You deserve it. Not just for me, but for you. Marian looked at her son, her eyes gentle and full of pride. You know, when you were in college, I dreamed that one day the two of you would go somewhere far away. But at that time it was just a dream. I never expected that today. You would be the one to take me there. Ava was silent. She just took her mother's hand and squeezed it gently. Her heart was filled with pride and a vague anxiety. After a light breakfast, they called a taxi to the airport. The air on the road that morning was special. The sun rose slowly, the sunlight filtering through the trees, creating long streaks of sunlight on the car windows. The city began to come to life again. Pedestrians hurried, car horns harmonized with radio music. Marian looked out the window and smiled. Atlanta is beautiful. You see, it has a different color in each season, Ava replied, her eyes still looking straight ahead. Mom, I've been to many places, but only here have I found my truth. All my paths begin from this city. Mom smiled softly, and then we'll lead you further. The car pulled up at the entrance to the Aerolux private terminal. The shiny sign, the upscale area separate from the commercial airport. The staff, dressed in neat uniforms, bowed slightly as they stepped out. Welcome, Ms. Carter. We are ready for boarding. Ava nodded, a small, polite smile on her face. Her mother paused, watching the silver plane parked in the distance, the sunlight shining on its shiny metal. Oh, it's so beautiful. Ava, I never thought I'd get to fly on a plane like this. Ava looked at her mother, then at the plane. There was not only pride in her eyes, but also a hint of worry, a feeling that was hard to name. She tried to wave it away and turned to the staff. Thank you. Our luggage is here. Has the pilot arrived yet? Yes, they are preparing for the final inspection. Please wait in the VIP lounge. The lounge was tastefully decorated, with large glass walls overlooking the runway. The smell of roasted coffee hung in the air. Ava sat down and checked her email. Everything was normal, no news, no warnings, but she was still uneasy. Marian sat beside her, holding a cup of tea. Honey, let me ask you something. Are you stressed a little? But that's okay. I always do this before important meetings. At your age, if I was still stressed, I probably wouldn't have been able to survive in that world. They both laughed, a soft laugh spreading through the quiet room. Ava looked at her mother, suddenly feeling calmer. The door opened. A woman in flight attendant uniform walked in, smiling but averting her eyes. Excuse me, Miss Carter. The pilot would like to confirm the passenger list. Please show me your passport and flight information. Ava handed over the bag, her voice still calm. It's all in here. The flight attendant bowed in thanks and left. As the door closed, Marian said softly, You know, I think she's a little strange. Her voice was trembling. Ava smiled, trying to reassure her mother. She probably just did it. Don't worry, everything's fine. But in her heart, a faint signal flashed, a feeling like a premonition. She looked at her watch. 6:45, only 15 minutes to take off. She looked around the waiting room. Everything was quiet. But something in the air was different. Not the smell of coffee, not the loudspeakers, just an eerie silence, as if someone were watching. Ava took a deep breath and told herself, Calm down. Don't let your imagination get the best of you. She stood up and walked closer to the glass wall. The plane was still there, its propellers silent, its lights reflecting off the clear sky. In the distance, a black SUV stopped. Two men in suits got out and walked straight into the control room. Ava only caught a glimpse, but it was enough to make her heart beat faster. "What's wrong, son?" Mom asked, worried. Ava turned back, smiling, her smile so soft and calm it was almost fake. "No, it's nothing. Mom, I'm just thinking about the contract I'm about to sign." Marian nodded, looking out the window again. "You know, sometimes I think, no matter where you go, I just want to see you safe." Ava looked at her mother for a long time. "Mom, I just wish I could give you that peace." The attendant returned and said they could board the plane. Mother and daughter gathered their things and walked down the corridor to the tarmac. The wind blew, making Ava's suit jacket flutter. As she approached the plane, she looked up slightly. The sun had just risen above the horizon, its light shining directly into her eyes. She squinted, and in that moment, a vague feeling flashed through her as if fate was waiting ahead, in that deep blue sky. Little did she know that just a few hours later, this very place would become the center of an unprecedented media storm. But at that moment, all she saw was her mother holding her hand, her eyes filled with trust, and Ava smiled, a small smile, but powerful. "Mom, when I get to Paris, I want you to see the world I'm building, a world where no one is left out just because they're different." Marian nodded, her voice soft as the wind. "I believe you, Ava, always." They climbed the stairs, the morning light reflecting off their faces. And somewhere in the distance, time slowed down, holding on to the last moment of peace before the storm. The sky was just beginning to brighten, a thin layer of sunlight covering the low-rise buildings of Atlanta. The black SUV rolled slowly down the driveway, the air filled with the smell of new leather and the faint scent of Ava's wrist perfume. Ava sat in the back seat, looking out the window. Her mother, Marian, sat beside her, clutching a small bag in her lap. Outside, the city was starting to wake up. Pedestrians crossed the streets, coffee shops opened, and red and yellow lights flickered between the dense traffic. "Mom, did I tell you about the oak tree in front of my company headquarters?" Ava asked softly. Marian turned and smiled. "No, which oak tree?" That oak tree grew right in the middle of the yard, where people often walked by. When I rented that building, many people said it should be cut down because its roots were blocking the walkway. But I kept it. Why? Because it lived there before I came, just like the people before us. Mom, even if the foundation is cracked and we have to go around, I still want to keep it." Marian nodded, her eyes lost in the distance. "You're right. Anything with real roots, no matter how hard you try to cut it, will grow back." The car turned onto the highway. The wind blew hard, stirring Marian's hair. Ava stared into the distance, thinking about the upcoming meeting in Paris. Part of her was still excited the biggest deal of her career, opening the global doors for NovaShield. But another, smaller, quieter part kept reminding her that something was wrong. She remembered Ethan Hargrove's call 2 days ago. The way he'd said, "We'll meet in Paris," echoed in her head, as clear as if he were sitting across the table from her. Marian looked at her daughter, who was silent for too long, and gently touched her hand. "You seem to be thinking a lot." Ava smiled, a smile that couldn't hide her tiredness. "I was just thinking about work. Mom, about how people can use power as a weapon instead of responsibility." power," Marian said slowly, "does not corrupt anyone. It only reveals their true nature." Ava turned and looked at her mother for a long time. "Your father said that, right? Yeah. He said it when I was 8, after he lost his job at the hospital because he dared to stand up for a black patient. He told me, your child will have to face people like that someday. Just teach him to remember who sacrificed so he can stand up." Ava was silent. She remembered the old photos of her father, clearly, the man with the gentle gaze and steady hands. Perhaps that was why she always felt a quiet strength within her, one that came not from status but from the belief that she could not bow down. The car passed through the suburbs, where low-rise buildings gave way to industrial estates and warehouses. The sky began to change color, white clouds drifting lazily by. The driver turned around and said politely, "Miss Carter, we have about 40 minutes to reach Aerolux Terminal." "Thank you," Ava replied. "Go slowly. I don't want to be too early." She turned to look at her mother. "Mom, when we get to Paris, I want to take you to that cafe by the Seine I read about. They say it's so quiet there in the morning you can hear the bread baking." Marian burst out laughing, her laughter spreading throughout the car. "Just promise to take me to the bakery, and I'll go anywhere. I like small, warm, and real places, just like when I was a child. I forgot all my tiredness after just one apple pie you baked." Ava smiled too. "I'm still the same. I just hide my tiredness better." There was a brief pause. The car rolled up the hill and the view widened. In the distance, the runway of the airport could be seen. Marian leaned her head back in her chair and looked out the window. "Do you believe that everything happens for a reason? Maybe so. But sometimes the reason is only clear after we have passed." "That's right. Just like when I mortgaged the house that year. At that time, I simply wanted you to live your dream. But later I understood that it was that dream that saved my faith in life." Ava looked at her mother, her eyes softening. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have come this far. If I didn't have you, I wouldn't have known how valuable my sacrifice was." Mother and daughter smiled together. But behind that smile, there was something trembling slightly, like a wind passing through the heart. Suddenly, Ava's phone vibrated. The screen displayed a new email. The subject line, "Flight Confirmation Update, Aerolux." She opened it. The content was just a short sentence. "Thank you. Your itinerary has been updated." She frowned slightly. What update? She checked the details and saw that the departure time had not changed. The destination was still Paris. Only a new note had been added. "Please verify any additional passengers." She ran her fingers across the screen, thinking. Everything seemed normal, but the feeling inside her was stirring again. Marian saw the change in her son's eyes and asked, "What's wrong?" "No, just a flight confirmation email. Maybe they have some passenger updates." Other passengers were flying privately. Ava pursed her lips and closed the phone. "It must be a system error. I'll ask again when we get there." She looked out. In the distance, the sky was fading to a pale blue. Thin streaks of cloud stretched across it, as if someone were painting a picture of peace, but their hand was shaking slightly. Marian gently held her son's hand. Her hand was warm and trembling. "Don't think too much. Whatever happens, I believe you will know how to face it." Ava nodded. "I know. Just being here with me is enough." The car slowed as it turned into the private driveway leading to the private terminal. The Aerolux sign appeared ahead, gleaming in the sunlight. The driver stopped and looked down. "We're here, Ms. Carter." Ava took a deep breath. Everything seemed normal uniformed workers, the distant sound of engines, the faint smell of fuel, but inside her, a strange current of air rose like the wind before a rain. She took her mother's hand and smiled. "Let's go. Mom, Paris is waiting." Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes sparkling. "Just stay with me, whether it's Paris or anywhere." They stepped out of the car, the morning light falling on their shoulders, making their silhouettes blend together in the open courtyard. Everything seemed so peaceful, so beautiful, that no one would have thought that in a few hours this place would witness a huge wave that would shake the entire media world. The silver plane sparkled like a dream. Ava looked at it for a long time, then whispered to herself, "Today, you will see the world I am building, a world where no one has the right to take away another person's pride." She held her mother's hand tightly and walked up the stairs with her, her heart filled with confidence and a vague premonition like a cloud that had not yet cleared in the sky. The Aero Lux plane sat still on the runway, the morning light reflecting off its shiny metal body. The air was fresh, a gentle breeze blew, and the scent of fuel hung in the air. Ava Carter walked up the stairs with her mother, each step sure and filled with anticipation. Inside the cabin, the cream-colored leather seats were soft and smooth, and large windows let in light. A female flight attendant bowed, her smile a little forced. "Good morning, Ms. Carter. We are very pleased to serve you and your wife today." Ava smiled slightly, her voice soft. "Thank you. We only have a little luggage. The flight is to Paris, right?" "Yes, that's right." Marian sat down in the window seat, her eyes shining. She looked out, watching the other planes go by, then turned to her daughter. "It's beautiful. Ava, I've never seen the sky so close." Ava smiled, taking her mother's hand. "You'll see it even closer when we take off." The flight attendant returned with lemonade and cold towels. The atmosphere was initially calm, but Ava sensed something was different. A group of technicians outside the door had not left yet. They were exchanging something over the walkie-talkie, their eyes constantly on the plane. 5 minutes later, the cabin door opened. A tall man in a black suit, with a flight supervisor name tag, walked in. His voice was polite but cold. "Excuse me, Ms. Carter, but we need to confirm the flight information. There seems to be a discrepancy in the booking system." Ava frowned slightly. "Duplicate. We paid and confirmed 3 days ago. Yes, I understand. But according to the latest list from Aero Lux headquarters, this plane has been booked for another customer at the same flight time." Marian looked around, surprised. "How is this possible? It was my daughter who chartered this trip." The man kept his voice steady. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're just following instructions. I need you two to please leave the plane for inspection." Ava stood up, her voice quiet but powerful. "I am Ava Carter, CEO of NovaShield. I have all the paperwork confirming this flight. I want to see the person in charge of Aero Lux immediately." The man looked at her for a few seconds, then said softly, "I'm afraid they've given orders. This plane won't take off with you on it." The atmosphere in the cabin became heavy. The flight attendant bowed her head, avoiding Ava's eyes. Marian took her daughter's hand, trembling slightly. "Ava, what's wrong?" Ava took a deep breath. "It's okay. Mom, I'll handle it." She opened her phone, checked the confirmation email, her voice still calm. I have an electronic contract with Aerolux. I have a code. I have payment confirmation. There is no reason to cancel the flight. The supervisor shrugged, his eyes cold. I understand, Miss Carter, but some decisions are not in my hands. You should leave the plane now. Ava felt her heart rate slow, not from fear, but from a deeper realization. This wasn't a system error, this was intentional, and she knew who could be behind it. She looked straight at the man, her voice low. It's Hargrove Capital. Right. The other man was a little startled, then avoided eye contact. Without answering, he only said, I hope you will cooperate, so we don't have to call airport security. The words were like an invisible slap. Marian stood up, her eyes wide. Call security. My daughter is your client. Ava gently pulled her mother's hand, her voice still calm. Mom, it's okay. But inside, every vein in her heart was tensing up. She didn't want her mother to witness this scene, but she couldn't avoid it. She turned to the supervisor. Do you know that this action is a breach of contract and discriminatory? I was just following orders. Ma'am. Good. Write down the order and give the name of the person who gave it. I'll need it in a few hours. He paused for a moment, then said coldly, Sorry, I cannot reveal that information. The door opened. 2 uniformed security guards entered, blocking the entrance. Marian looked around, tears welling up in her eyes. Ava, what are they going to do? Ava took a deep breath, keeping her voice as gentle as possible. It's okay. Mom, let's go. There's no need to stay in a place that doesn't respect others. She turned back and looked straight at the supervisor. I went, not because I was afraid, but because I would not stoop to a place of indignity. She helped her mother out of the cabin. As soon as they left, the door slammed shut, the sound echoing on the runway. The sunlight was piercing her eyes, blinding her. Outside, a few other passengers stood at a distance, watching. Some whispered, others held up their phones. A young flight attendant looked at Ava with pity and whispered, I'm sorry, Miss Carter, there's nothing I can do. Ava just nodded, smiling. It's okay, I'm used to it, but this time they won't forget so easily. Marian stood beside her son, her hands shaking. Son, I'm sorry for making you go through this. Ava took her mother's hand and looked deep into her eyes. Mom, it's not your fault. The ones who are at fault are those who think they have the right to judge others. Mother and daughter walked slowly along the runway, the wind blowing hard, over the wind. Ava could hear the sound of cameras, the sound of filming, the voices of people talking. She could sense it. This moment would not be silent. Marian asked softly, What are you going to do now? Ava raised her head and looked up at the clear blue sky above. Her voice was low and determined. I will do something they don't expect. They think they've just insulted 2 black women. But in 20 minutes, the world will know who should really be ashamed. Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes both proud and worried. Ava, don't let anger make you lose your cool. No, Mom, I'm not angry. It's time to teach them what justice is with the truth. She took out her phone and opened the recording app. The wind blew harder. Her hair was messy, but her eyes were bright. She spoke to the camera, her voice clear, each word echoing through the wind today. I, Ava Carter, CEO of NovaShield, was forced off a flight I legally chartered, simply because I'm black, and my mother, who has sacrificed her life, was humiliated with me. I want the world to see this. I will not be silent." She hung up and looked at her mother. "I promise, this won't end here." Marian nodded slightly. "I believe you. Ava, I have always believed in you." The wind blew again, carrying the sound of the airport loudspeaker from afar. The sunlight shone on the faces of two women, one old, one young, both standing straight, not avoiding it. And in that moment, Ava understood true strength lies not in power, but in standing firm when the world tries to push you down. Ava Carter stood in the middle of the runway, phone still recording. Her mother, Marian, stood beside her, her face still streaked with tears but her eyes filled with pride. Little did anyone know that, within minutes, the world would know them. The video Ava posted to social media was just a minute and a half long. No background music, no effects, just two black women standing in the middle of the runway, a silver Aerolux plane in the background and the sound of strong wind. She spoke briefly, calmly, each word clearly, her eyes not angry but determined. Within 2 minutes, the video had been shared hundreds of times. 5 minutes later, it had been shared thousands. In the taxi back to the city center, Ava sat still, staring out the window. She didn't intend to say more, only occasionally glancing down at the glowing screen of her phone. Notifications kept popping up, texts, calls, reminders, comments. Marian touched her daughter's hand gently. "Honey, this could be a big deal. Are you sure you want this?" Ava raised her head, her voice low but firm. "Mom, silence never protected anyone. There are times when the truth needs to be told. And if it's not me today, then who will?" Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes growing moist. She nodded slightly. "Let them hear you. Ava, but remember, tell the truth. Don't let anger lead you." Ava smiled, a small but radiant smile. "Mom, I promise." The car stopped in front of the NovaShield office building. Outside, several reporters were waiting. She stepped out. Amid flashbulbs, someone shouted, "Miss Carter, what really happened this morning?" Ava paused, looking straight into the camera lens. "I just want to be treated like a human being. Nothing more, nothing less." That short statement silenced the crowd for a moment. Then the sounds of cameras, recordings, and keyboards began to ring out. Ava stepped into the elevator, her heart still pounding. She wasn't afraid. She just felt a strange energy inside her. It was as if a door had opened, and the light inside could no longer be blocked. When she got to the 23rd floor, her assistant, Jenna, was waiting for her, looking worried. "Ava, my God, you're going viral. Every news channel is sharing the video. CNN, BBC, even the Washington Post has reposted it." Ava nodded slightly. "Good. They need to see this." "Do you want me to delete the video?" Jenna asked softly. "There's still time, if you want to control the situation." Ava looked out the window, the morning light reflecting off the glass. "No. Jenna, this is not my story anymore. This is the story of thousands of people who have been treated like me but have no voice." Her phone buzzed again. A text message appeared. "Ethan Hargrove is being questioned publicly. His statements are being edited and circulated." Ava looked at the words for a long time. Then she raised her head and said softly, "It's just the beginning." 10 minutes passed. The news agencies got involved. On Twitter, Ava Carter, Aerolux scandal. Stand with Ava topped the search results. A reporter from a national TV station called for a live interview. Marian sat beside her daughter, holding the hot cup of tea Jenna had brought her. Are you scared? Ava. When things get bigger like this, Ava exhaled, her voice calm. I'm not scared. I just feel heavy, not because of them, but because I know every time black people stand up, they pay a higher price. Marian put her hand on her son's shoulder. But you're not alone. You have your mother. And there are people out there watching you. They see themselves in you. Ava smiled, her eyes slightly moist. I hope so. The phone rang. Jenna picked it up and quickly handed it to Ava. It's Aerolux. They want to talk to you. Ava answered the phone, her voice hurried and confused. Ms. Carter, this is the communications director of Aerolux. We would like to apologize for the incident this morning. There must have been some kind of misunderstanding. Ava kept her voice calm. A misunderstanding. So when you called security to kick me and my mother off the plane, it was just a misunderstanding. Are truly sorry. My team did not follow proper procedures. What process allows people to discriminate? Ava asked bluntly. There was silence on the other end of the line for a few seconds. Then the voice lowered. We will fire the people involved, and the company will issue an official statement within the hour. Ava closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Don't send the press release to me. Send it to the people who saw the video. They're the ones you should apologize to. She hung up. The room was silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock. Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with emotion. You did it, Ava. Ava sat down in her chair, her eyes distant. Not yet. Mom, this isn't just about me. This is about no one being silent when they see someone being treated unfairly. The phone rang again. This time it was a reporter from the New York Times, then Forbes, then dozens of others. She let it ring, not rushing to answer. She looked out the window where the sunlight was brighter, the sky wider. 20 minutes after the video was posted, Aerolux issued an official statement on all platforms. We deeply apologize for the discriminatory incident this morning. The individuals involved have been suspended. The internet exploded. Millions of comments poured in, with people calling Ava Carter the new icon of modern justice. But Ava didn't smile. She just sat there, looking at the words on the screen, then turned to her mother. Mom, I'm not happy, because for this apology to come, someone had to be humiliated in front of the whole world. Marian squeezed her daughter's hand. But you have made them see what they tried to hide. That is enough. Ava leaned her head gently on her mother's shoulder. Maybe, but I won't stop here. I want people like you people who have endured silence all their lives to know that they can speak up. Outside the window, the sky was covered in golden sunlight. A gentle breeze blew. Marian spoke softly, her voice soft but full of pride. My daughter, today you changed something in this world. Ava closed her eyes, letting the wind blow through her mind. She didn't need to win, just to see the truth. And somewhere, high in the clouds, the Aerolux plane was being held on the runway. The entire crew was being called in for questioning. In the control room, Ethan Hargrove's voice came through the phone, cold as steel. Who let this get out? No one answered. Only one employee trembled and whispered, Sir, everyone has been fired. 20 minutes, just 20 minutes, and the balance of power reversed. In just a few hours, the whole of America knew the name Ava Carter. From a female CEO, little known outside the tech world, she became a symbol of a national debate about equality, honor, and dignity. Every TV station, newspaper, and social media platform replayed the minute-and-a-half clip. They analyzed her eyes, her voice, even the moment Marian stood behind her, her eyes wet and proud. A CNN editor commented, "It's not just a video about discrimination. It's an image of dignity being challenged, and how a woman chose to stand up instead of fighting back with anger." In her 23rd floor apartment, Ava sat by the window, her phone still ringing. She didn't answer. Marian sat across from her, holding the morning paper. The headline in bold black CEO kicked out of private jet 20 minutes later. The world changed. She read quietly, then put the newspaper down. "Can you believe it? Ava, they wrote about you, about us." Ava let out a soft breath, her voice low and slow. "Mom, I don't know whether to be happy or sad. I don't want to be known for the humiliation. I want to be known for what I created." Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes gentle and deep. "But remember, sometimes the world needs pain to look back at itself, and you made them look." Outside, dozens of reporters were still on duty. In the lobby, people carried signs, "Justice for Ava. We stand with her. Respect has no color." Police had to direct traffic around the building. Jenna walked in, tablet in hand. "Ava, you need to see this. Aerolux just released a second statement, officially firing the entire crew, including the flight supervisor. And they named the person behind the call, Ethan Hargrove." The room fell silent. Marian turned slightly to look at her daughter. Did they just admit it? Ava stared at the screen, her eyes unblinking. Maybe they had no choice. The storm was too strong. Jenna lowered her voice. Hargrove Capital lost nearly 30% of its stock price in just one morning. The board of directors is in an emergency meeting. Some partners have announced their withdrawal. Ava remained silent. She was not happy, not gloating. There was just a strange emptiness in her heart. "Jenna, prepare a speech for me. I will speak to the press this afternoon." Marian looked a little startled. "Are you sure?" "Ava, you don't need to defend yourself anymore. They've apologized." Ava shook her head slightly. "I don't want to defend myself. I want to speak up for those who haven't had a chance to stand up." At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, hundreds of reporters were waiting in front of the NovaShield building. The sky was clear, the sunlight slanting down on the raised signs. When Ava stepped out, the crowd fell silent. She wore a simple black suit, her face bare of makeup, only a steady gaze. She stood at the microphone and took a deep breath. "I didn't come here to talk about anger. I came here to talk about dignity." Her voice was steady and deep, each word clear. "Yesterday, my mother and I were kicked off a plane because of the color of our skin. But today, I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about what we can do to make sure that never happens to anyone else." Below, the crowd was dead silent. A reporter asked, "Do you think you won?" Ava smiled, her eyes softening. "No one wins when someone gets hurt. We only move forward when we listen to each other." Applause broke out. Many were in tears. Ava bowed and walked down the steps. Marian waited at the bottom of the steps, opening her arms and hugging her daughter tightly. "Well said. Ava, your father must be proud. I just said what needed to be said. Mom." That evening, Ava returned home to a city still aglow. She turned on the TV and saw live news on several major channels. Her image appeared alongside the caption, "A voice of calm in angry times." Marian brought her a cup of hot tea and placed it gently on the table. "You know, some of my old neighbors called me. They were crying. They said they never thought someone from their community would have the whole country listening to them." Ava was silent, her eyes looking far away. "Mom, I don't want to stop here. I want to start a scholarship fund for students of color to pursue technology. I want something real, something that can't be taken away." Marian smiled, her eyes shining. "You're like your father again, when he said, 'Justice is not shouting loudly. It is acting loudly enough to make people dare not be silent.'" Ava looked at her mother and smiled slightly. Maybe I inherited his way of believing in the good. Outside, the phone rang again. It was Jenna. "Ava, you should know this. The White House just sent an invitation. The president wants to meet with you next week to discuss anti-discrimination policy in the airline industry." Ava leaned back in her chair, looking up at the ceiling. All from one flight, a flight and a refusal to bow. Marian whispered. They both laughed. It was a soft, warm laugh that filled the room. But in their eyes, there was something deeper than joy. It was the calm after the storm. That night, as the city was bathed in yellow light, Ava stepped out onto the balcony. She looked up at the sky, where the stars were shining brightly. "Dad, I did it," she whispered, "but I won't stop." The night wind blew by, as light as a touch, and in that moment, she felt small but steady, like a grain of sand in the desert, knowing that no matter how the storm blew, the truth would remain. Elsewhere, in the luxurious room of Hargrove Capital, Ethan Hargrove threw his phone on the table, his face red. How did that video go viral? Who allowed her to make me a sinner in front of this country? An assistant bowed his head, his voice trembling. "Sir, no one allows it. People only see and share." Ethan was silent, his hands clenched. He understood that in this world, there were things money could not control. The storm has passed, but its echoes remain in every word, every look, and in the hearts of those who believe that one strong voice can change the world. A mid-autumn morning in Washington, the air was crisp, the sky was blue, and the wind was cool. The black car rolled through the grand gates of the White House, American flags fluttering in the sky. In the car, Ava Carter sat quietly, her hand lightly holding a brown leather notebook, something she carried with her on every important trip. Marian Carter sat next to her daughter. She wore a pale beige coat, her silver hair pulled back in a bun. Her eyes were filled with pride. "It still seems like a dream." "Ava, the White House, who would have thought we would be here? Invited by the president himself." Ava smiled, but there was an indescribable feeling inside. "Mom, I don't think they invited me for the fame. I believe they invited me for the message. A message of kindness, right?" Marian asked. "Yes, and of the belief that the truth, however late, can still change the world." The car stopped. A receptionist in a black suit opened the door and bowed slightly. "Welcome, Miss Carter, Mrs. Carter. The president is waiting in the Oval Office." Ava took her mother's hand and walked downstairs. The autumn wind blew gently, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. The sky was so clear that she felt strangely at peace. They walked through a grand hallway with a white ceiling, where light reflected off the pictures of people who had changed America. Marian paused before a portrait of Martin Luther King, Jr. "Look, Ava." His gaze was still as deep, Ava paused, nodding slightly. He had a dream. And, Mom, I think we're continuing that dream. A staff member led them into the Oval Office. Inside, the president, a middle-aged man with a kind face and warm eyes, stepped out to greet them. He held out his hand. Miss Carter, Mrs. Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you. Ava shook his hand, her gaze calm but firm. Thank you, Mr. President. I never expected a video to bring us here. The president smiled. Sometimes it's not a policy that changes the world. It's a true story. You made millions believe that dignity can't be bought, and that fairness is worth fighting for. Marian bowed her head slightly. You're too kind. I'm just a mother. You are the soul of this story, the president said, his voice warm. When people see you standing next to your daughter, they understand the power of love and faith. Ava looked at her mother, her eyes slightly moist. Mom, see, you are my foundation. After a few greetings, they sat down. The communications advisor presented a draft of a new policy, the Equal Journey in Aviation and Technology program, inspired by Ava's case. Ava listened intently, each word of the proposal touching something deep inside her. When the advisor finished speaking, the president turned to her. Miss Carter, we would like to hear your opinion. Ava placed her hands on the table, her voice soft but clear. I think the most important thing is not the law, but awareness. People can fear the law and still disrespect others. But if they are educated to empathize, to understand, then they will not dare to look down on anyone anymore. The room was silent for a few seconds. The president nodded. You're right. That's why I want you to be an honorary advisor for this program. You'll have the opportunity to help us bring multicultural education and equality into our schools, into our businesses, and into our government. Ava was a little taken aback. She hadn't expected the invitation to come so quickly. I'm not a politician. I'm just a tech person. The president smiled. And that's why we need you. Because it's ordinary people who can speak most honestly about injustice. Marian held her daughter's hand under the table, hers warm and trembling slightly. Ava looked over and saw absolute trust in her mother's eyes. She took a deep breath and nodded. I agree. A soft applause echoed in the room. A young advisor whispered, Miss Carter, you have just done what many people only dream of. Ava smiled. I don't dream of power. I dream of justice. After the meeting, the president escorted them down the hallway. Before parting, he turned to Marian. Mrs. Carter, I want to thank you for raising a woman who has given the nation something to think about. Marian replied with a gentle smile. Mr. President, I only taught my daughter one thing when you are pushed down. Stand up with dignity. The statement made the president silent for a few seconds. He bowed to them solemnly. Outside the White House, the wind blew harder, whipping the fallen leaves around. Ava stopped on the steps and looked up at the blue sky. Mom, Dad must be smiling up there. Right. Marian nodded slightly. My child, your father once said that one day, justice would have a human face. Today, I think he saw that face. Ava put her arm around her mother's shoulders, and the two stood looking at each other, saying nothing more. In the majestic setting of the White House, the image of two black women, one old, one young, immersing themselves in the midday sun, became a symbol of something greater than any award or fame, a triumph of truth, of dignity, and of love. That evening, back at the hotel, Ava opened the window and looked out at the Washington night sky. The city lights reflected on the Potomac, sparkling like 1,000 stars. She opened the leather notebook and wrote a few lines. Justice is not a light that comes from outside, but a flame that we keep in our hearts, no matter how many times it is blown out. Marian came in, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. "What are you writing?" Ava closed the book, smiling, a promise that I will continue. They sat down by the window, watching the people below. A gentle breeze rustled the curtains, carrying with it the distant sound of car horns and the scent of autumn trees. "Mom," Ava whispered, "I realize that sometimes to change the world, you just have to dare to say what everyone is afraid to say." Marian put her hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes gentle. "And to remain kind when the world listens to you, that is the hardest thing." Ava nodded slightly. "I know, Mom, and I will never forget." Outside, the lights of the Capitol were still shining brightly, but in the hearts of the 2 women, that light had softened, becoming peace. A new journey had begun, no longer a war, but a mission. The Washington night was quiet. The moonlight shone down on the Potomac River like a silver ribbon. In the hotel room, Marian slept peacefully, her breathing even, her face gentle and peaceful. Ava sat at the table, the soft light of the desk lamp reflecting on the open leather notebook. She picked up a pen and wrote each line as if talking to someone, "Dad. I came to the White House today. They call me a symbol, a voice of justice. But I know it all started with something you once taught me. You cannot change the world if you do not keep kindness within yourself. I remember, Dad." Ava closed the book, her eyes blurred. She stood up and walked out onto the balcony. The night air was cool and smelled of dry leaves. She looked down at the street, where the lights reflected off the wet pavement, and suddenly the image of her father appeared as clear as a breath away. He stood in the old woodworking shop in their hometown, his tanned hands wiping a picture frame. He raised his head, a gentle smile, his voice warm. "You know, daughter, when people try to make you believe you're small, remember that they're afraid of your strength." The memory made Ava's heart ache. She clearly remembered the day her father died, a summer afternoon. Marian was kneeling by the bed, tears falling silently. Her father held their hands, his voice fading. "Live a good life, and never bow down to anyone. Your dignity is the only thing no one can take away from you." Those words lit a fire in Ava's heart, burning to this day. She turned to look at her mother, the woman who had fought all her life to keep that promise. She didn't need speeches, she didn't need the spotlight, she just lived by loving and keeping her heart pure. Ava realized that everything she had today came from those 2 skinny hands. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains, Marian woke up. She saw her daughter sitting in the chair by the window, her eyes still tired. She asked softly, "Ava, aren't you asleep yet?" Ava turned back, smiling. "I miss you, Mom." Marian looked away. "Me too. I dreamed about him last night. He was standing by the river, looking at us and smiling." Ava was silent, her voice soft. "I dreamed of Dad too. He said, 'You're doing great, but don't stop.'" Marian sighed softly, her smile tinged with sadness. "My father always believed that justice is not the end, but the beginning of humanity." Ava took her mother's hand. "I think he's right. Mom, I want to go back to the village, to Dad's old lumber yard. I need to be where I started." 2 days later, they flew back to Alabama. where Ava was born. The small village was nestled among cornfields and oak trees. The old wooden house still stood, its roof faded, its windows still hung with the curtains her father had sewn. As she entered, Marian touched the wall lightly, her eyes welling up. This place still smells of him. Ava walked slowly down the hall. She stopped at the old desk where her father used to sit and draw the doorframe designs. On the desk were still a stub of a pencil, a metal ruler, and an old photo of the three of them on the day the workshop opened. Ava held the photo and smiled. "Dad, I've come a long way, but I'm still the little girl who sat here watching you work." Marian stood beside him, her voice choked. "You know, every night before I go to sleep, your father prays for you to live a life without fear." Ava put the photo on the table, sat down, and rested her chin on her hand. "I'm not scared anymore, Mom, but I'm tired of being strong for so long." Marian stepped forward and hugged her daughter. "You don't have to be strong all the time. Just be real. That's enough." They sat in silence. Outside, the wind blew through the oak trees, rustling leaves. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long streaks of light on the floor. Ava stood up and opened the workshop door. Inside, dust covered the wooden chairs her father had unfinished. She took a towel and gently wiped each grain and each line. She remembered her father's hand running over them. Slowly and carefully, "Dad, you taught me how to make valuable things. Maybe today I understand that value lies not in what you make, but in how you treat others." Marian stood behind, smiling quietly. "Yes, Ava, I understand." She turned back to her mother. "Mom, I want to restore this factory, but not as a business. I want to turn it into a career center for young people of color, a place where they can learn a trade, learn to code, learn to believe that they are worthy of their dreams." Marian burst into tears. "Your father would be proud. He used to say, if you can't change the world, at least change one person's world." Ava looked out the door, where the light stretched out like a road to the future. "So I'll start here, Mom, where Dad started." In the afternoon, they sat on the porch, drinking tea, listening to the crickets chirping. Marian leaned her head on her daughter's shoulder and said softly, "You see, sometimes big storms are just to bring us back to where we belong." Ava smiled and nodded. "Yes, Mom, I think I found peace." At that moment, a gentle breeze blew by, scattering a few papers on the table. One fell at Ava's feet. She picked it up. It was an old piece of paper, written by her father, faded with time. "One day you will fly high, but remember, your feet belong to the earth, and your heart belongs to love." Ava read aloud, her voice choked up. Marian held her hand, and they looked at each other, tears streaming down their faces, but they were tears of joy. That evening, they lit candles on the altar and placed a picture of their father among the white flowers. The flickering candlelight reflected off the picture, bringing his smile back to life. Ava closed her eyes and whispered, "Dad, I have flown so high, but I am still your daughter," Marian replied softly, "and you are still our light." Outside, the moon rose high, illuminating the ripe rice fields. The chirping of insects seemed to be singing a lullaby to a dream, a father's dream, now come true in the arms of the women he loved most. One spring morning, the sunlight spread golden light over the young cornfields. The wind carried the scent of earth, of new beginnings. Ava's father's old workshop was now different. The smell of wood mixed with the smell of new paint. the rhythmic sound of hammering mixed with the laughter of young people. The sign in front had been repainted, with white letters standing out on the wooden background, "The Carter Workshop, a place to rise." Below, in smaller, handwritten letters, "Founded in memory of David Carter." Ava stood in the entryway, a folder in her hand, her hair blowing in the breeze. She looked around and smiled. It was starting to take shape. The dream she, her mother, and her father had once cherished. Inside, groups of young students sat around tables, listening intently to instructions. Some were learning basic programming. Others were learning woodworking techniques. A few were trying to write their first resumes. They came from all over, poor black, brown, white youth, girls who had been dropped out of school, boys who thought they had no future. Jenna, Ava's assistant, walked over, iPad in hand. "Ava, there's a reporter from the New York Times who wants to come and cover the project today. Do you want me to arrange it?" Ava smiled, her voice soft but firm. "Let them come, but tell them not to film me. Film the students. This story isn't just about me anymore." Jenna nodded, her eyes full of respect. "I think your father would be proud if he saw all this." Ava looked away, smiling softly. "I know, but he'll remind me that justice only truly matters when it touches other people's lives." At noon, Marian walked out into the yard, carrying a tray of freshly baked cornbread. The aroma wafted through the yard. She called out, "Everyone, take a break, eat some cornbread, and then continue." The group of children laughed, their voices echoing with the wind. A little girl named Layla ran over, her curly hair tied up high, her eyes shining. "Marian, this cornbread is so delicious." Marian smiled, patting the girl's head. "Eat a lot. You need the energy to study." Ava watched the scene, her heart suddenly filled with an indescribable emotion. The image of her mother among the children made her feel like she was witnessing continuity. Something simple yet profound. Kindness can still grow even from old wounds. In the afternoon, as the sunlight softened, Ava stood at the front of the classroom. She looked at the students, her deep voice echoing in the quiet space. "I didn't come here to teach. I came here to share what I've learned, that our true worth lies not in where we start, but in where we end up. You can come from anywhere, but don't let anyone tell you that you have to stay there." She paused, her eyes meeting each young face. "My father started in a small wood shop like this. He didn't have much, but he believed that if one person could maintain integrity, the whole world would be a little better. And now, I want that belief to live on in you." There was a burst of applause. Layla raised her hand and asked, "Ava, have you ever been afraid?" When people looked down on you, Ava smiled, her eyes shining with tenderness. "Yes, Layla, everyone is afraid, but my father once said, 'Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the taking of steps when you're afraid. And as you take steps, your fear becomes smaller.'" That evening, after everyone had gone home, Ava and Marian sat in the workshop. The only light left was yellow lamps on the unfinished wood panels. Marian slowly said, "You see, the fire has spread. Your father may be gone, but his faith burns in every person here." Ava was silent for a moment, then said, "Mother, I think this is what I've been looking for all along. Not fame, not justice through words, but seeing someone rise up because of what I left behind." Marian looked at her daughter, her eyes full of pride. "You've come a long way, Ava, but wherever you go, I hope you'll keep that kindness." Ava smiled softly, her voice a small promise. I will, Mom, because that's what Dad left me. A few weeks later, a story about the Carter workshop appeared on the front page of the New York Times with the headline, From Humiliation to Hope, How One Woman Built a Space for Rising. The article recounted Ava's journey from being kicked off a plane to standing in the White House, and now creating a place with her mother where young people can learn to believe in themselves. The article ended with a quote from Ava. No one can take your dignity away from you unless you give it to them. The post went viral, with thousands of people writing in to express their gratitude, sharing that they saw a lot of themselves in Ava and Marian. A retired pilot wrote, "Thank you for making me look back at my past silences." A black female student wrote, "You give me the confidence that I can stand on any stage with my head held high." The next day, the small Alabama lumber mill was flooded with visitors. There were students, journalists, even businesses wanting to cooperate and support. But Ava only said one thing. If you come here, come to learn how to listen, not to order. Everyone was silent, then nodded. Marian stood behind, her eyes full of pride. In the afternoon, Layla brought Ava a handwritten card. Miss Ava, this is our card. We want you to know that you have taught us more than just skills. Ava opened the card. Inside was a scribbled line, "Thank you for teaching us to believe in ourselves. We will pass this flame far and wide." After Ava finished reading, tears welled up in her eyes and fell onto the paper. She hugged Layla and said softly, "No, it was you guys who gave me the belief that all the hard work was worth it." At night, when everyone was quiet, Ava and Marian lit the porch lamp. The yellow light was small, but it spread a warm glow throughout the yard. Marian said softly, "You see, our light is small, but it is enough to light someone's way." Ava replied softly, "And it will never go out, Mom, because every person who has ever come here will take a part of that light with them." In the distance, fireflies twinkled in the night, like thousands of tiny flames rising. Ava looked up at the starry sky, her heart at peace. She understood that justice was no longer a battle, but a flame passed from hand to hand, over time, through the hearts of those who dared to believe that the world could be better. One early summer morning, sunlight streamed down the dirt road leading to the wood workshop. The cornfields in the distance were lush green, and the chirping of birds echoed everywhere. The sign, "The Carter Workshop." A place to rise now had a small line added below it, "Community Center," sponsored by Hope Foundation. Ava's project was no longer just a small workshop in Alabama, but had expanded to 8 states, partnering with numerous educational organizations, training hundreds of young people each year. Ava walked out of the small office next to the workshop, a stack of financial reports in hand. Jenna followed, her voice full of excitement. "Ava, we just got approved for another $2 million from the Gates Foundation. They said they want to take your model to inner-city high schools." Ava nodded, a small smile that couldn't hide her joy. "That's great, Jenna. But the most important thing is to keep the spirit of the project. Don't let anyone turn it into a marketing tool." Jenna smiled. "You're really uncompromising." Ava looked out, the sunlight bouncing off the glass. "No, Jenna, I just don't forget why I came here." As they entered, a man in a dark suit was waiting for them. His face was instantly chilling. Ethan Hargrove. Ava recognized him without introduction, even though it had been almost a year since the incident. The image of the man was still seared into her memory, his powerful face, his cold eyes, and the voice that had made her leave the plane with her mother in humiliation. Ethan stepped forward, his expression calm but somewhat tense. "Miss Carter, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Ava stood up straight, her voice calm. "I don't remember agreeing, but you're here. So tell me." Ethan nodded slightly, his eyes lingering on the factory sign. "I know, no apology can erase what happened, but I didn't come here today to apologize. I wanted to talk about cooperation." Jenna looked startled, but Ava motioned for her to be quiet. She said slowly, "Our partnership." After all, Ethan nodded. "I left Hargrove Capital. I started a new fund, a social investment fund. I want to support community education projects, especially for people of color, and I think there's no one better at doing that than you." Ava looked him straight in the eye, her voice low but sharp as a knife. "You want to start over by working with the person you once humiliated?" Ethan was silent for a moment. "You have every right to think so. But honestly, that incident made me look back. I lost everything, my reputation, my job, my friends, but it was in the rubble that I learned what true regret was. The air in the room was still. The wind from the window blew in, making the curtains flutter." Ava sat down, arms crossed. "You want me to believe you?" Ethan looked at her, his eyes no longer arrogant. "No. I just want you to give me a chance to prove it." Jenna looked at Ava, but Ava said nothing. She was silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the outside, where the students were laughing and talking in the courtyard. They, people who had suffered, were now learning to believe in themselves. And now, before her, was the man who had represented that unjust system, looking for a chance to make things right. Finally, Ava said, her voice low and slow, "I don't believe in words. I believe in actions. If you really want to make amends, come work here like everyone else. No desk, no title. Do you dare?" Ethan was stunned for a moment. Then he nodded, his voice soft. "I dare." The next day, Ethan returned, without the expensive suit, just a white shirt and jeans. He stood with a group of young students, learning how to saw wood, plane tables, and dust. Many recognized him, pointed, and gossiped. Ava said nothing, just watched. At noon, when Ethan carried the food tray out to the yard, Layla, the girl who had asked Ava about her fear, looked at him curiously. "Who are you? Why do you look so clumsy?" Ethan smiled, a little embarrassed. "You're the one learning to start over." Layla laughed heartily. "Then you're like me." Seeing that scene, Ava smiled slightly. Maybe justice is more than just punishment. Maybe it is also a chance for people to make amends. A week later, Ethan came to see Ava in her small office. He looked tired, but there was something different in his eyes, softer, more genuine. "Miss Carter, I want to thank you. I never thought I would learn anything from mopping floors and cutting wood. But here, I see myself again." Ava fell silent. "You don't need to thank me. If you're sincere, let your actions speak for themselves." Ethan nodded slightly. "I've decided to transfer all my remaining assets to your scholarship fund. I don't want this to be associated with me. I just want to help others have the opportunities I once took away." Ava looked at him for a long time. "I will accept, but only if you truly understand that forgiveness is not for your own good, but for others to continue living without hatred." Ethan bowed his head. I understand." As he left, Jenna entered, her voice laced with emotion. "Do you really believe him?" Ava replied, her eyes looking away. "I don't, Jenna. I just allow hope to try again." In the afternoon, Marian came out of the house, carrying a cup of hot tea. "Ava, I think that man looks honest." Ava nodded slightly, smiling. "I think Dad would tell me to do that. He always believed that everyone deserves a second chance." Marian smiled gently, and I just gave it. In the evening, Ava went out onto the porch and sat on her father's old wooden chair. She looked toward the workshop, where the lights were still on. The remaining students were finishing their first product, a long table engraved with the words, "Rising Together." She whispered to herself, "This is the justice my father spoke of, not to put down those who are wrong, but to lift up those who dare to correct." The wind carried the scent of jasmine in the air. Marian called out from inside the house, "Ava, come in. The night is cold." Ava smiled, stood up, and went back in. But before closing the door, she looked back one last time. Across the yard, Ethan was still wiping the table, the lamplight illuminating his face, tired but peaceful. She whispered, "The door is open, and this time, anyone can come through." On an autumn morning, Alabama is awash in golden leaves. The soft hum of chainsaws echoes through the woodworking shop, and the scent of fresh paint and pine blends into a distinctive aroma. The Carter workshop is no longer just a place to learn a trade, but has become a community center where people come not just to learn, but to regain confidence in themselves. Layla, the curly-haired girl, was 18 now. She stood teaching a group of new students, her eyes shining with fire. "You know, when I first came here, I was scared. I didn't believe I could do anything right. But Ava taught me that sometimes the most important thing is to dare to start, even if my hands are shaking." Everyone listened attentively, while Ava stood at the back of the workshop, looking at Layla with gentle eyes. She knew that this moment was proof of all her efforts. The seed she had planted had grown, and was now planting more seeds. Outside, Marian was guiding some elderly women planting trees around the workshop. She whispered to them, "Every tree needs deep roots to stand firm, and so do people. We plant trees not just for shade, but to remind ourselves that some things take time to grow." They laughed, their laughter clear in the sunlight. Ethan Hargrove still works here. Today, he is helping a group of students paint windows. Sweat runs down his forehead. His hands, which once held millions of dollars, are now covered in paint dust. A young student named Miguel asks, "Uncle Ethan, why are you here? You used to be very rich." Ethan stops, looks at the boy, his voice low but warm. "You are here because you forgot what true value is. You need to learn how to be a human being again." Miguel nods, his eyes full of admiration. "I think you learn quickly." Ethan laughs, a gentle laugh, something he probably never knew before. At noon, everyone gathered in the courtyard to eat together. A long oak table, the very one that read "Rising Together," was placed in the middle. On it were plates of yellow cornbread, fresh vegetable salad, lemonade, and wildflowers picked from around the workshop. No one spoke of the past, only the cheerful sounds of storytelling and laughter like the wind through the trees. Ava looked around, a warm feeling filling her heart. This was what she had dreamed of, a place where people came not out of pity, but out of respect. Suddenly, Jenna walked over, phone in hand. "Ava, you have to see this." She held up the screen. It was a news report from CNN, The government approved the Equal Wings program, inspired by the Carter Workshop model, to be rolled out nationwide. Ava finished reading, but said nothing. She just looked up at her mother, then at the faces sitting around the table. Marian smiled, her eyes brimming with tears. "Look, your father is probably clapping." Ava laughed, her voice cracking. "Mom, I didn't think it would go this far." Marian gently took her daughter's hand. "You don't have to think. Just be kind, and the world will find its way to thank you." In the afternoon, Ava was invited to the program announcement ceremony at the local town hall. She wore a simple blue dress and walked calmly up to the podium. Below, Ethan, Marian, Jenna, Layla, and hundreds of others sat silently, looking up. The light fell on her face, soft and bright. "A year ago," Ava began, "I was kicked off a plane, but today I stand here not to talk about the past, but to talk about the future. We have learned that justice is not about making people pay, but about helping them understand the value of kindness." She paused, her eyes on Ethan, then continued. "When people fall, what the world needs is not a look of contempt, but a hand to help them stand up, because if we only know how to punish, we will forget that kindness needs to be learned." The room fell silent. Then the applause broke out, and it lasted. Marian wiped away her tears, and Ethan bowed his head low. Ava stepped down and hugged her. "Mom, I think I said what Dad wanted me to say," Marian whispered. "Dad would be proud." That night, when we returned to the workshop, the sky was filled with stars. The students had not yet left, and they were hanging paper lanterns around the yard. Layla ran over, holding a heart-shaped lantern in her hand. "Miss Ava, this is yours. We wrote our thanks on it." Ava held the lantern, reading each line written in different handwriting. "Thank you for believing in us. Thank you for teaching us to love ourselves. Thank you for forgiving even those who don't deserve it." She hugged the lantern to her chest, tears rolling down her face, but they were tears of happiness. As night fell, the courtyard was lit up with hanging lights, sparkling like stars falling to the ground. Everyone sang, their voices blending with the wind, rising high into the sky. Ethan stood silently watching the scene, then turned to Ava. "I used to think power was in money. Today, I understand it is in kindness." Ava nodded slightly, and kindness never loses its value. "Ethan." That night, Marian sat on the porch, looking at her daughter. "Do you feel like you've accomplished your mission?" Ava smiled, her eyes shining in the moonlight. "No. Mom, this mission never ends. But now I know I'm not alone." In the distance, Layla and the young students were writing their wishes on paper. A boy read aloud, "I want to teach other children in the future, like Ms. Ava taught me." Ava heard it, and her heart was filled with warmth. She raised her head to look at the sky and said softly, "Dad, Mom, I think I understand. When you light up one person, the world becomes a little brighter." A gentle breeze blew. The paper lanterns flew high, carrying their wishes. In that moment, Ava realized the flame of justice, of love, of faith now escaped her hands, to fly everywhere, into the hearts of those who had been lifted up, and she smiled, knowing that their tomorrow had begun today. Early in the morning, the sun rose from behind the hills, light filtering through the dew-covered oak trees. Marian's wooden house was as peaceful as ever, except now there was laughter, voices, and footsteps from the nearby workshop. Ava woke early, as usual. She made coffee, the aroma wafting gently through the kitchen, the drip of the coffee maker blending with the chirping of birds in the garden. Marian walked in, her hair much grayer than before, but her eyes still bright and kind. "You're up early, Ava?" she asked. Ava smiled, her voice gentle. "I have a conference call with the team in Washington. They're preparing to launch an academy named after my father." Marian nodded slightly, her eyes shining with pride. "The David Carter Academy. That's a beautiful sound. He'll smile when he knows his name is associated with your dream." The meeting ended, and Ava stood before the mirror, examining herself in the early morning light. There were a few wrinkles under her eyes, and she wore the calm smile of someone who had weathered a storm. She no longer looked stressed, nor did she have anything to prove to the world. Each day, she chose to live meaningfully with her mother, with the young people at the workshop, and with herself. At noon, Jenna drove up. She got out with a folder in her hand, her face beaming. "Ava, good news. The National Board of Education has decided to introduce a place to rise into the public school system. They want you to be an honorary advisor." Ava smiled. "That's great, Jenna, but I don't want to be an advisor. I want people who went to school here to teach. They're the ones who really understand the spirit of the program." Jenna nodded, her eyes filled with admiration. "You're like that, always letting the light shine on others first." Ava laughed, "Because I know the light never runs out if you share it." That afternoon, the workshop held a ceremony to celebrate its 3rd anniversary. Flags and balloons hung all over the courtyard, and soft music played. Familiar faces appeared: Layla, now the lead instructor of the life skills class, Miguel, who had opened his own furniture store in town, and Ethan, who still worked there, but now managed the charity projects. He approached Ava and handed her a small plaque that read, "To Ava Carter, the woman who taught us to rise." Ava looked at the inscription, her eyes stinging. "Thank you, Ethan, but I don't teach people to rise. I just show them that they always can." Ethan smiled, his eyes full of respect. "That's teaching." "Ava." As dusk fell, people gathered around the courtyard. Marian was called upon to speak. She looked around, her voice slow but steady. 3 years ago, all I wanted was for my daughter to survive her pain. Now she's not only alive, but helping hundreds of others live a meaningful life. I believe that when you plant a good deed, no matter how small, it will sprout on the right day." The courtyard applauded. Ava stood beside her mother, holding her hand, feeling its bony but warm touch. After the ceremony, night fell, and everyone was still out. They went to the field behind the workshop, where Ava and Marian had set up a memorial garden called Garden of Hope. Each tree had a small wooden plaque engraved with the name of someone the workshop had helped, not just to honor them, but to remind them that each person was a testament to their faith. Layla handed Ava a small box. "Ava, these are sunflower seeds. We want to plant them to symbolize the light you gave us." Ava opened the box, and inside were small, pale, yellow seeds. She was moved. "Thank you. Sunflowers always face the sun. But you know, they bloom even when it's cloudy. Like humans, if we have faith, we will still grow." She sowed the seeds with everyone else. Laughter mixed with the sound of the wind blowing through the fields, making the paper lanterns sway gently. Ethan stood at a distance, watching the scene, then turned to Marian. "Mary, I don't know what to say other than thank you. Thank you for giving birth to her." Marian smiled kindly. "No, I only gave birth to a child. It was the world that made her extraordinary." Late at night, everyone had gone home. Ava and Marian sat on the porch, the moonlight casting a soft, silken glow on the floor. Marian leaned on her daughter's shoulder and asked softly, "Do you have any regrets?" Ava looked into the distance, where the lights in the yard were still flickering. "No, Mom. I used to complain. I used to get angry, but without those things, I wouldn't have known what kindness was." Marian nodded slightly, her eyes shining with peace. "So, I've learned my biggest lesson." At that moment, a gentle breeze blew by, making the curtains flutter. Ava looked up at the sky and saw a shooting star streak across it. She smiled slightly, thinking that it was her father's greeting. Everything in her heart suddenly became peaceful. The next morning, as dawn broke, the sunflower seeds they had planted yesterday began to sprout. The early morning sunlight shone down, making the dew on the leaves sparkle like diamonds. Ava stepped out onto the porch, looked at the sprouts, and whispered, "Mom, Dad, the light is still spreading, and I know it will never go out." In the distance, Layla was teaching the children a new song she had written for the workshop. Her clear voice rang out in the morning. "We rise, we heal, we shine again." Ava closed her eyes, listening to the song, her heart filled with deep emotion. It was not just a song, but the breath of everything she had lived, believed, and passed on. As the sun rose, Marian placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder and whispered, "You see, your father's last light is not in the lamp, but in these people." Ava smiled, tears falling but her eyes still bright. "I know, Mom, and I promise it won't stop here." The wind blew again, carrying the scent of flowers, the sound of singing and laughter. In that moment, Ava knew that all the pain and trials were just preparations for this moment when true kindness would spread. And she understood that the greatest justice was not to punish the wrongdoer, but to heal the wounds of both the injured and the one who caused it. The sky was a deep blue, and the fields were filled with brilliant light. Marian held her daughter's hand, and the two of them stood looking out at the workshop, where young people were working together to build a new building. "Hope Hall," Ava said softly, her voice as light as the wind. "This is not the end. Mom, this is just the beginning of a new world where everyone can stand up and shine." And when the sunlight touched them, the two women, a mother, a daughter, smiled. They needed no more words, because the final light they created was not in a house, a speech, or a project, but in the hearts of awakened people. Their story, from a moment of humiliation on a plane to a journey that lit the faith of thousands, has now ended. Not with tears, but with light. The light of forgiveness, of justice, of humanity, of hope. The story Black CEO and her mother kicked out of private jet 20 minutes later. Everyone Was Fired is not only a journey to reclaim justice, but also a testament that kindness and dignity can be stronger than any power. Ava Carter did not choose revenge. She chose forgiveness, not because the wrongdoer deserved it, but because she deserved peace. From the pain of being humiliated, she turned her hurt into action, building the Carter Workshop a place where marginalized people can stand up and shine. The deepest message of the story is justice is not about making someone pay, but about helping them learn to become better. For older audiences, this is a reminder that every stage of life, whether hurt, failure, or loss, can become a beautiful piece of tolerance and kindness. Life does not require us to be perfect, as long as we still keep a warm heart and believe that good will prevail. Thank you for listening to this story, a journey not only about justice, but also about faith, healing, and kindness. If you feel something touches your heart, please like, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to help us spread more meaningful stories. Because sometimes, just one share, you can help the light of kindness spread farther than ever.